let's get back to the main event of the day, though. Rafe Heydel-Mankoo, very good morning to you, Rafe.
Good morning.
I guess we need to start with the White House. We've got plenty of clips to play for you on various different things. But Keir Starmer over in America finally gets to meet the 47th President of the United States. He's only fourth European leaders to do so, behind Poland, France and Italy. So, you know, he's in the top 5, which is okay.
Just ahead of Zelensky.
But just ahead of Zelensky, who's going on Friday. We've been saying all week, isn't it interesting that, you know, all the naysayers last week who were telling us that Zelensky was being rode out of the process, and wasn't it shameful and disgraceful that Donald Trump was using his own narcissism to sort of, you know, suck up to Vladimir Putin. It all seems to be working out pretty well, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I mean, you know, it may be that investing in Ukraine, putting American workers there, may be an economic guarantee where they won't provide a security guarantee. But I mean, I think the big question we're all dying to know today is Keir Starmer going to hold Donald Trump's hand?
Yes.
Like Theresa May?
Well, Donald Trump does have a habit, doesn't he, of grabbing people's hands and sort of holding on to them.
Exactly.
And so it may well be that that's what he ends up doing.
And we saw Theresa May squirming. You can just imagine how much Keir Starmer will be squirming. I mean, there's every reason that there was trepidation about this visit because, of course, we had everything we've had from Musk and also from J.D. Vance about free speech in Britain. We had the great issues about Labour Party volunteers going and helping the Democrats in the election. Then, of course, the issues over the Chagos Island. The selection of Mandelson was very controversial. So there's a lot of reason to be a bit trepidatious about this. But yet, at the same time, Trump, well-known Anglophile, has spoken positively about Starmer, which is quite something. And hasn't actually said that there'll be any tariffs so far. And that's going to be one of the great issues for this visit. Will Trump actually clear Britain to having zero tariffs? Because we just found out, of course, that they're going to be applying some form of 25% tariff on the EU.
On the EU.
You still have that hanging over Mexico and of Canada. The thing is, of course, we just had Macron there standing ground with Trump as France's great leader. He's very much an alpha male like Trump is. Impossible to imagine Starmer doing what Macron did, interrupting Trump, correcting him, putting his hand on his knee, asserting himself. I'd rather think Starmer will be a slightly different character.
I don't. I mean, he doesn't exhibit any great form of sort of social grace, does he? I mean, he's awkward, generally speaking.
Or presence, or charisma.
He has no charisma, he has no presence, and he's just generally awkward, and he almost to the point where he doesn't seem to know how to stand or how to sit. I mean, we saw with Macron, he was being made fun of by some Trump fans because Trump made him sit to his right behind the same desk, which made it look like he was sort of his pupil, you know, sort of sitting next to the Grand Master, you know. Whereas, who knows what's the setup
will be outside looking in the window,
Trump
I think.
is very good at this kind of thing, isn't he? Because he knows I mean, he's basically a TV star.
Exactly.
He's been on The Apprentice, he ran the show, he knows how to play to the camera, whereas Starmer just looks as if he's kind of never sure quite which way to look or which way to stand.
Well, the great test will be if Trump says something particularly wild and provocative, and Starmer is standing next to him. What does he do? Does he try to correct him as Macron did, and then get a slap down from Trump, or does he say nothing at all? And then the Labour Party are going to say, "Well, you've got no spine. You're a weak poodle."
I mean, there are all sorts of dangers in this thing. Let's kick off with David Lammy. He was talking last night about the Chagos Islands, because this is going to be a big thing, I think, today. It may well be one of the main things that they end up talking about. Here's David Lammy explaining what will happen coming up.
On a military level and an intelligence level, we're very intertwined with the United States. We struck a deal. After striking that deal, there was a change of government in Mauritius, and the new government in Mauritius had to have time to look at the deal, and there has been a change of government here in the United States, and the United States administration have had time to look at the deal. I still believe it's the best deal.
But does President Trump have a veto?
Well, if President Trump doesn't like the deal will not go forward. And the reason for that is because we have a shared military and intelligence interest with the United States. And of course they've got to be happy with the deal, or there is no deal.
It's not exactly holding any kind of line, that, is it? So if Trump doesn't like the deal doesn't exist, basically.
Yeah, if you want to see a picture of someone backpedaling in a hurry, it's David Lammy here, who has staked so much of his career on reparations. David Mastermind Lammy, who has staked so much of his career on reparations and on this deal. As I said before, someone needs to remind him, being Foreign Secretary doesn't mean you put foreign interests first.
No.
You should put British interests first. And in this situation, British interests are also American interests. And what this government has done is it's put ideology over Britain's national interest, and has put this post-colonial decolonisation above sound military and economic sense. And we knew this was going to happen, that he was going to have to backtrack on this, because it's quite simply a disaster for Britain. It's a disaster for America. It strengthens China at a time when we know that America is focusing its efforts on trying to reduce the power of this. This whole deal just stinks.
And if they're talking about ramping up security in Europe and ramping up spending on military equipment and military budgets, then it makes absolutely no sense in that context to then give the Chagos Islands away, where there's an important military base.
Yeah, I mean, they use the Chagos Islands for the attacks in Afghanistan and Iraq. That's what the Americans used it for. Mauritius, we know, is close to an ally of China in many respects. If we just lease that base and give the Chagos Islands, China will be able to install all sorts of things around there. Mauritius is also part of the anti-nuclear weapon treaty, which means you may not even be able to have nukes on those islands as it is. The fact is, we need a bit more of this Britain first type thing we see with America first. You know, Trump wouldn't stand for an ICJ ruling. The ICJ is dominated by people who hate Britain. One of the judges was a member of the communist government who supported Putin in Ukraine. Another one wants us to pay £18 trillion reparations to the Caribbean. We've got to understand these institutions are not the ones that we set up. They are cuckoos in the nest who are running them. We have no obligation to abide by ICJ rulings, and they have no way of enforcing any rulings. And in the past, when an ICJ
it's not even law, it's an advisory judgment,
you can't enforce ICJ rulings. The only ones who can enforce it are the Security Council. And guess what? We have a veto. We're one of the big five on the Security Council. There's no reason we should be even discussing this.
No, exactly. It's absolutely mad. Let's have a look at what Nigel Farage said yesterday in the House of Commons on the same subject.
Who tell us this has to be done because of legal uncertainty. But of course, there is no legal uncertainty whatsoever. And you know, you can shake your heads if you want, but you know I'm right. The ICJ has no jurisdiction over this whatsoever. So why are we doing it?
Absolutely.
And so why are we doing it? It's a very good question. Also, Robert Jenrick's been talking about it and giving the sort of history of the islands, and how at no point really has Mauritius had any claim on it at all.
Well, this is what's so interesting, because what Lammy and the Labour Party are doing is they want Britain to basically feel guilty for having an empire. This is all about decolonisation. They're making Mauritius into the third colonising power. First it was the French, then it was the British. Mauritius has never owned the Chagos Islands. They are 1,500 miles away from the Chagos. People need to understand that. Those islands were uninhabited until the French and the British arrived there. There's no connection there whatsoever. Furthermore, the Chagosians who've lived in Mauritius have been terribly treated. Second-class citizens. They've been
discriminated against.
Discriminated. You know, aid money that went to them was never given to them, was sucked up by the Mauritian government. We've now had the Mauritian president who organised this deal arrested and investigated for corruption charges. The whole thing stinks. And you also now have a law passed in Mauritius, which is like Hong Kong with China. In Mauritius, you cannot criticise this deal or you'll be imprisoned and arrested. Those are the people that Keir Starmer wants to hand over the Chagos Islands to.
Incredible, isn't it? And on the front page of the Daily Mail, historic White House summit is the sort of the strapline. But basically, on the eve of the Prime Minister's critical meeting with Trump, Labour repeatedly fails to deny that a significant chunk of its increase in military spending will fund the seller of the airbase. Now, this is going to cause a problem in Washington, because apparently yesterday afternoon, when this became clear that Starmer might be spending part of his 2.5% of GDP increase on Chagos and giving this money to Mauritius, the White House said, through the sort of back door, I think, through aides to Trump, this is not what the defence budget money should be spent on. The defence budget money in Europe must be spent on defence, not on giving the money away to Mauritius.
And how embarrassing. It has to be a foreign country that tells that to the British government. It's common sense. Well, look, quite frankly, we are paying Mauritius to take our property. That's like me paying you to live in my house.
I know.
I mean, there is no logic to this whatsoever.
Like me giving you, it's like me, I said this before, it's like me giving you a car and then paying you to drive it away. Right? Even though you're supposedly buying it.
And anyway, we're supposed to be on a war footing, apparently, with our new defence spending. During the Second World War, we were spending 7% of GDP on... That's a war footing. Going from 2.3 to 2.5 is not war footing. We need a hell of a lot more money going into the defence budget, and taking it away to give to the Chagos Islands is simply insanity.
It is. It came up at Prime Minister's questions yesterday. Here's Keir Starmer talking to Kemi Badenoch about the defence budget.
the weekend, I suggested to the Prime Minister that he cut the aid budget, and I'm pleased that he accepted my advice. Mr. Speaker, it's the fastest response. It's the fastest response I've ever had from the Prime Minister. However, he announced £13.4 billion in additional defence spending yesterday. This morning, his Defence Secretary said the uplift is only £6 billion, which is the correct figure.
Prime Minister.
I'm going to have to let the Leader of the Opposition down gently. She didn't feature in my thinking at all. I was so busy over the weekend I didn't even see her proposal. I think she's appointed herself, I think, saviour of the Western civilization. It's a desperate search for relevance. But, Mr. Speaker, look, if you take the numbers for this financial year and then the numbers for the financial year 27-28, that's £13.4 billion increase.
He's actually wrong there because he's adding 2 years together.
It's 6 billion.
Right, he's putting 2 and 2 together to make 7, which is not quite right. Also, he's been sort of criticised quite heavily there for being unnecessarily harsh on Kemi Badenoch by making fun of it. I don't really care whether he makes fun of Kemi.
PMQs. I think that's the whole purpose of it.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that a lot of the sketch writers have said, you know, other cleverer people would have been slightly less brutal with the put down, trying to make out that she's not relevant at all. I mean, the problem is that Kemi Badenoch is about the only person in the world that actually makes Keir Starmer look quite good.
Week after week.
That's the trouble.
Yeah, week after week, we're hoping she's going to land some good blows against him,
right.
and somehow, of all people, this thin paper envelope manages to stay standing after each PMQs.
Yeah, no, she manages to make him look quite clever, which I don't know how she manages that.
And you can see now in the polling where of all of the shadow cabinets, she ranks one of the lowest, and the top one is Robert Jenrick.
I know.
I think there'll be buyer's remorse going through Tory party members.
I think there will be. We'll come back with some more on what is going on around London, around the country, around Britain, and